listening to the Blue Raider Podcast, presented by Gold's Gym of Tennessee. Your all-access pass to everything Middle Tennessee sports, game recaps, player spotlights, and the latest from the heart of Blue Raider Nation. Now, here's your host, Jay Golden.
Welcome back to the Blue Raider Podcast, presented by Gold's Gym of Tennessee. Today's episode, we're going to be previewing our first Conference USA midweek game that kicks off tomorrow night at 6:30 against Missouri State there in Floyd Stadium. And joining us is going to be Brett Walker of MTSU Sidelines. But before we do that, let's thank today's sponsor. Before we get into the episode, I need to thank our sponsor. Gold's Gym has been the mecca of fitness since 1965, and to celebrate their 60-year anniversary right now, you can get a month-to-month membership for just $19.65 bi-weekly. That's no commitment, full access to all 16 Gold's Gym Tennessee locations, and top-tier equipment to help you level up your fitness no matter your sport. But here's the deal. This offer is only available online, and it ends when the summer does, so don't wait. Go to goldsgym.com and lock it in today. Gold's Gym Tennessee. Train like a legend, no strings attached. Now, let's get back to the episode. Joining us now on the Blue Raider Podcast to preview our first Conference USA midweek game of the year, it is the sports editor at MTSU Sidelines, Brett Walker. Brett, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me as always, Jake.
Having you on once again, short turnaround, I guess, in terms of you for previewing games, but it has been a long time since that last matchup, again, going all the way back to last Saturday against Kennesaw State. The Blue Raiders, we kind of had an opportunity to, quote-unquote, right some wrongs in the early going of Conference USA, but I can't help but look back at that game at Kennesaw State and see a team that only won one game last year, and now they have surpassed the Blue Raiders with a win this year on the road. But I guess it's hard to look too down on that. Losing is bad. But I don't look back at that game and think everything is terrible because, of course, the game could always be worse. But I guess for me to try to shine a little bit of positivity, there are some things to look at as positives. You kind of won that game for 3 quarters. It was just unfortunate that you got off to probably the worst start you could have gotten off to.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I think the disappointment, like you kind of alluded to, the disappointment factor comes in when you look at, I think, maybe the disparity between the two programs right now. Kennesaw State obviously you saw where they were last year, and now it's like you said, they've almost surpassed MTSU. They won on last Saturday, so they've surpassed MTSU in that in a year's time. So I think that from an outside perspective has to be frustrating. But on a positive note, like you said, they played for better. MTSU played the better game for 3 quarters. They had a chance to go and tie at the end. They outgained Kennesaw. MTSU put up its most offensive yards that they have this season. And so there's certainly some positives to take away. Obviously, the starting out conference play 0-1 is not what they wanted. But like you said, some good things on top of all the bad, too.
And going into this conference schedule, the one thing about Kennesaw, we were kind of foaming at the mouth beginning of the year because you start the year off with Kennesaw, the worst team in Conference USA last year, followed up by 2 of the newcomers to Conference USA and Missouri State tomorrow night, and then the midweek game in 2 weeks against Delaware. So you again have this slate ahead of you where you're like, well, we could start Conference USA at 3-0. Well, the first one's gone, and in credit to Jerry Mack and what he's done down in Kennesaw. I mean, they got a big win against Arkansas State, and of course beat us at home to open up their Conference USA play. So maybe when we look back at that game and think, oh, you lost to Kennesaw by 8, that may not be the worst loss that we're going to get. But Missouri State ahead, and I'll look even further ahead to Delaware. Delaware looks really, really good. And we're recording this ahead of the Delaware Western Kentucky game. So if Delaware comes out a winner in that Western Kentucky game, Delaware looks like championship title contenders potentially, because now they're 2-0 and they've beaten the 2 best offenses in Conference USA, which is what you need to do to win this conference. But I don't want to get too far ahead. But I bring up Delaware to say this is a game you got to win. You want to come out of this early stretch 1-1, but you definitely don't want to start behind the 0-3 at Delaware, because then you got Jack State right after that. So we talk about trying to right some wrongs, trying to get yourself back on course to have a successful season, this is a game you got to do it. You got to win this football game. I'm not even saying keeping it close. This is a game you have to win, just to even feel remotely good about the remaining schedule.
Yeah, it's almost like you hate to say that in college football because, on paper, every game is a must win, but this one absolutely is for MTSU if you want a positive outlook on the rest of the season because, like you said, 0-2 hole going to Delaware for conference play. That's a brand new road trip for MTSU. You don't know how that's going to play into it too, so you definitely can't afford to start 0-2. And then as for like the season as a whole, any sort of shot that they have remaining at bowl contention is definitely, hinges on this game. So, and really just for the momentum, regardless of the outlook on this season, the momentum moving forward with the program, you really need to get a home win if you're MTSU. It's been almost a year since they beat Kennesaw State a year ago on that Tuesday night game, I believe, 14-5.
Ugliest football game I ever
Ugliest
witnessed.
football game I think I've ever witnessed, and we've had how many weather delays since I've been covering this? I mean, it was nasty. Vadiato was sick the whole time. Nobody, I don't think wanted to be out there, but they got it done, and they need to get it done again to have just a better outlook on the rest of the season for sure.
Well, to set the stage for the Bears, who is this Missouri State team coming in? They had themselves a battle in their last matchup on the road at Western Kentucky, where they lose 27-22. But again, when we talk about how do these teams lose these games, or excuse me, they hosted Western Kentucky in that loss. But how do these teams lose this game? Well, in Missouri State's side of it, their starting quarterback, Jacob Clark, goes down with an injury very early in that football game. Prior to, he was actually having a relatively good game. So how does Missouri State kind of navigate their season now with Jacob Clark, a guy that, again, has impressed me? I wasn't on my radar as far as top Conference USA quarterbacks, but he is questionable for this game tomorrow night. That's going to add a big question. It's going to add a big, what is the game plan for MTSU now? Because they've talked about going with a freshman, and we'll have our preview of this for the Behind Enemy Line segment that'll come out the day of kickoff on Wednesday. But they have a freshman quarterback that is mobile, but doesn't necessarily have the pocket presence that Jacob Clark has. So what do the Bears decide to do there? But overall, this is the worst scoring defense in Conference USA, which I know is surprising given what this team has done at times. But I don't know how much I pin on the Blue Raiders defense and their defensive scoring issues on how good or bad the defense is. But Missouri State's has been bad. They're giving up over 31 points per game. Some of that is skewed because they gave up 73 points in their week 1 game against USC. And even since then, we talk about Marshall, an apples to apples comparison. They held Marshall to 21 points. Now, I would say my counter argument is, well, they didn't have Carlos Del Rio Wilson at quarterback when Marshall was there. So Marshall's offense is totally different now with Carlos Del Rio Wilson, a lot more improved. But they held a college football playoff team from a season ago to 28 points. So I don't know what Missouri State defense we're going to get. If you hold Western Kentucky to under 30 points, I think as a first-time comer or as a newcomer to Conference USA, I think that should be applauded. This team is, I don't know what form of defense we're going to get here. We're going to get the one that gave up 73 to USC, or the one that gave up 28 to SMU. A lot's going to be said because they're going to be facing a lower half CUSA offense in the Blue Raiders, but that's the biggest storyline I'm looking at. The quarterback one is one that, again, I think benefits the Blue Raiders because Missouri State's going to have to figure out their offense because they didn't figure it out against Western, and Western doesn't necessarily have the best defense in Conference USA, but they struggle to score the ball. So is this like another Nevada situation where they don't know who the quarterback is and we're going to be able to fumble our way into a 14-13 win? Potentially, but you got to muddy the water somehow if you want to come out with a win in this one, in my eyes.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things too. Like I've been on this beat for going on 2 years now, and I can't even remember how many times that it feels like that MTSU has ended up playing a backup quarterback in the game. It was Western last year with Veltkamp, which ended up being a bad thing for them because he turned out to be way better than TJ Finley ever thought about being. And then you had Wisconsin was a backup QB this year. Marshall, obviously Del Rio Wilson, the solidified starter now. Just so many, like Austin Peay, you didn't know. Like it's been, throughout Kennesaw last year, there was 2 quarterbacks. So Nevada, you talk about all these games where I don't think, it plays into it as much from a not knowing standpoint. I definitely think, like you said, it would benefit MTSU if Jacob Clark does end up being out because, he's a baller. He's one of those like 7th-year senior guys, been in college football forever, 4th currently in passing yards in CUSA at the time of recording. So that definitely would play into MTSU's hand, I would think, despite the fear of the unknown, just because of having a solidified guy like that. And then the defense you talked about, Missouri State's defense far and away better than MTSU's, and MTSU's offense hasn't thus far put up anything worth being afraid of. So, we'll just have to see. I definitely think it hinges on whether Clark plays or not. I think if Clark plays, it's heavily in favor of Missouri State for sure.
I didn't even think about the storyline of the quarterbacks like you brought up, but that is funny that at this point now, 4 of their 5 games or 5 of their 6 games will have had a quarterback discrepancy. If you count the Austin Peay game with Chris Parsons, who didn't really have much tape on him at Mississippi State, that's 5 of your 6 games now where you went in with a question mark of what does the other team have at quarterback. So, maybe I'll throw the defensive coordinator and Coach Mason a bone there and say they've had to prepare for quite a bit. But that is an interesting storyline, I think, to keep an eye on, because Delaware in 2 weeks, they're a program that has, Zach Marker was their starting quarterback, and now they're with Minicucci, who's turned out to be the 2nd best quarterback in Conference USA. So talk about playing a solidified starter for once. That'll be that could be some trouble, but maybe playing a quarterback that you expect is going to be the solution for him. Who knows? But we won't find out this week. But I really want to get into our keys of the game for this one. But of course, that segment is sponsored by Trevor Haggard at State Farm. And when life happens, you want someone in your corner who actually knows your name. And that's where Trevor Haggard State Farm comes in. Whether it's protecting your car, your home, or your family's future, Trevor and his team are right here in Murfreesboro, ready to help. So don't just settle for some 1-800 number. Call a neighbor who cares, and call Trevor Haggard State Farm today at 615-203-5522, or visit their website at trevorismyagent.com and let them help you protect what matters most. Trevor Haggard State Farm, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And again, big thanks to Trevor Haggard for sponsoring this segment. Brett, keys to the game. What do the Blue Raiders have to do to ensure that they win this game tomorrow night?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Jake, because the first thing they're going to have to do is finish their drives on offense. What was it that Derek Mason said? He said that they were going to be sick to their stomach last week after their loss to Kennesaw State. And I'll be honest with you, Jake, I can't really blame him because they had so many chances to go down there and win, or go down there and tie, rather, but they were 3 for 5 on their red zone possessions. Against Kennesaw, and in a one-score game, that's just not going to win you the ball game in the end. And the second thing was establish the run. Jaquel Middlebrook had far and away his best game as a Blue Raider last week, rushing for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the night. So that's really just been. It seems like throughout Mason's tenure, that's been really just part of the offense that has been lacking. Right? I believe it was last week was the most yards MTSU's put up on the ground since last homecoming when they played Duke, and half of that was, a 70-yard touchdown run to start the game. So it's like, it's for a coach who is so defensive-minded, like old-school-minded, the run game has just not been there for MTSU. And I know a large part of that was due to the offensive line last year and some shuffling around this year, but it's just at this level to help out your quarterback in this style of offense, you're going to have to establish the run if you want to have some consistency on offense, which they've been lacking dearly.
Well, that's something we heard, and I know I've echoed this a lot through these first couple of weeks. When we talked to Coach Reeder in our media day earlier this year, he said that he wants to be able to establish the run, and Mason said the exact same sentiment, that they want to be able to establish the run. If I can defend a little bit of why the run has been abandoned this early in the year, and it'll segue into one of my keys to the game. But the reason they're having to abandon the run so early is they put themselves so far behind that running the football is just going to milk the clock. And I think we see with Kennesaw where a game that is, again, got away from them early, but they slowly were able to chip away at that lead, allowed them to keep the ball on the ground. Marshall, that game got out of hand quick. And you no longer can't run the football with a quarter left and you're down by 3 scores. Nevada is the closest that they've been to a 50-50 run pass game, and the score is indicative of that. The game never got away from MTSU when they were in Reno. So when I'm going to jump ahead, if you're looking here on YouTube with us, my second key was weather the storm. We see this on a weekly basis at this point, that the game just gets away from the defense. And I have been very complimentary. You've been very complimentary on how good this defense has been all year long, and for good reason, because when you take out this 10, 12-minute window where the game just blows up, they're great. They're excellent. They keep this football team in the game for some parts. But when I look at Kennesaw State, the first quarter, you give up 3 touchdowns. That doesn't happen. You win the football game. Marshall, they go on 3 straight scoring drives after the lightning delay that we had. You take those 3 touchdowns out, you win the football game. Wisconsin, second half, you get all the way down to add on to your first key of finishing drives. You get a turnover on downs, and then Wisconsin goes on, I believe it's 4 straight scoring drives. And then Austin Peay, all the way back to week 1. Austin Peay scores 3 touchdowns over 4 drives in the second half. And once again, the game got out of reach. This defense, I don't know. Again, I'm not smart, but all I know is I can't help but point a finger to the game gets out of hand at one particular moment. And I would say it seems to be the second half, but Kennesaw was the exact opposite. It got out of hand early. The second half, they weathered. Right. Yeah. And same with Austin Peay. So they weather the storm in the second half and keep themselves in that football game. So that's why it's a big key to the game. I've been talking about this other one, convert on third downs, and you're kind of mentioning that too with finishing drives. They're the worst in Conference USA in third down conversions. They've got to convert on third down. Keep the offense on the field. Give yourself an opportunity to get into scoring situations, even getting in the red zone. Get Hathaway an opportunity to kick a field goal. 3 is better than 0, but my goodness, I think we all agree 7's better than 3. So we've got to convert third downs and give yourselves a chance. But I've been eager to get to this weather the storm monologue ever since I talked to Emmy in our last preview for the Kennesaw State game. Was like, I like to point the fingers at the offense, and they could certainly be better. But if your offense isn't good and the margin is so thin, the defense has just got to be great. And the defense has been good, but I think you would agree with me, the defense just hasn't been great. But let's keep this train rolling. Again, Trevor Haggard is sponsoring us because of his insurance capabilities, but we all need a little bit of insurance in our X Factor player this week. And Brett, tell me, who is the player that needs to be on his A game this week?
Well, Jake, you alluded to it a little bit, the offense having to make up for the defense, especially in those times when they get behind. So this one, for me, is Nick Badiotto. Now, don't get it misconstrued for anybody listening. I'm in no way blaming Nick for what happened last Saturday at Kennesaw State. However, I will say, sitting in the press box, which is a weird setup at Kennesaw, by the way. They have 3 separate press boxes. It was actually kind of nice. But they sitting in the press box, the offense gets the ball with around or under 5 minutes to go. They're down by 8. You think, all right, here it is. The redshirt senior is going to go get it, just like he did against Nevada, just like he's done his whole career at MTSU. And they had 2 chances to score, and they ultimately didn't finish. Now, is that all on him? No, absolutely not. Offensive line, some drops, some some overthrows here and there, just good overall defense by Kennesaw. But I'm going with Vadiato for the reason that I think he's going to have to be the reason they win against Missouri State and not just contributing.
Second straight week, Najee Cox. I'm straight to the point this week. The offense sputters. You got to look to the guy that has consistently brought his A game since he's gotten here, and that's Najee Cox. Again, I think back to Omari Kelly last year when you needed that first down, Nick found him. And Najee once again led the team in receiving last week at Kennesaw. I think I could even say Jaquil just continuing that consistency that he has, because all things considered, the rush offense hasn't been there, but when we give the ball to Jaquil, he's going to get you 3-4 yards, and he's very capable with a big breakaway. Even DJ Taylor got his opportunity last week and showed what he could do. So I think running back committee as a whole has their own role in this team having any sort of success, but we've just have not seen anyone in the receiving corps step up and kind of relieve Najee Cox of that pressure. Like Omari was able to look at Holden, and Holden was able to give him that. We've at this point thus far, we haven't seen anyone willing to take that pressure from Najee, and Najee's going to continue to get CB1 on the other sideline. So, but until someone has figured out how to shut this guy down, I lean to him to make sure that this offense keeps moving. And I think Nick would have probably been my choice had you not taken him, just because you got to lean heavily on that experience to get you through these one possession games like you had with Kennesaw and like you had against Nevada. Because right now in one possession games, you're 1-1. So if you can keep this game close, I like where this team is at as far as experience goes to get them through that, because you're going to be playing an inexperienced Missouri State team tomorrow night. So I think a lot hinges on leaning onto that experience, and guys like Najee and Nick certainly do that. But Brett, this line, it scares me because I don't know how much of it is recency bias, because Missouri State has had 2 really good weeks back to back. But I know ESPN, the predictor there, doesn't really give MTSU a shot. I think it's 60+% for Missouri State to win this game. But the weather looks great. I don't know if that plays a factor in this at all, but having good weather in your midweek Conference USA matchup is something that Blue Raiders weren't accustomed to last year. But how do you see this one folding out?
And like I mentioned it at the top of the show, Jake, I think this one really, it hinges on whether Jacob Clark is a full go and what kind of his health looks like for Missouri State. It's tough to say here at this point at the time of recording. I think I like Missouri State in a close one if he plays, but if he does not, I think MTSU also has a shot to squeak out the upset and pick up their first home win since last October, I believe. So
that'll be huge. The line, though, as we're recording this, they haven't released it because it's not game week. But I'm almost certain that the reason Vegas hasn't done it is because they're still awaiting the status of Missouri State's quarterback. But this line, I would predict to be in Missouri State's favor by probably a touchdown. Again, by recency bias of how well this Missouri State team played. But that line could certainly swing to a pick 'em, maybe 2.5, still Missouri State's favor. Given that Clark can't go, just because there's so many unknowns about this matchup, because what MTSU team are you going to get? What Missouri State team are you going to get? Until I have a reason to have some confidence in this team, I'm going to continue to pick against them. I think Missouri State's defense looked good in their last 2 matchups. I think this will be a low-scoring affair, as I have pretty much predicted all season long. A lot of the unders are going to hit. I like Missouri State in somewhere in that 24-18 range, like we saw with Kennesaw State. Maybe I'll just change it up a little bit. We'll say it's 24-21. Blue Raiders eclipse that 3-touchdown mark, but Missouri State beats them out by a field goal. But I don't want to be held to that, because if Jacob Clark is a go, I think that gap gets a little bit bigger. But as we record this, that's all we've got to go off of. But Brett, man, once again, I appreciate you joining us. This isn't going to be the last time you hear from Brett, because tomorrow, after the conclusion of the game, we will have a live stream of the press conference, and Brett will be joining us to recap our show today. But Brett, what stuff is coming from you at MTSU Sidelines to preview this Missouri State game that Blue Raider fans can tune into prior to kickoff?
Yeah, Jake, we've always got stuff coming down the pipe. Specifics. We always have a weekly preview with some of the other sidelines, someone from the opposing team that covers the opposing team. Then we'll have, of course, all of our game coverage with live updates, photo galleries, game stories. After the game, make sure you stay tuned for our sidebars, follow-up stories, any developments from the game. And then, as always, we have our weekly newsletter with 2 stories from each section, and it is free. So go to our website and sign up for that at mtsusidelines.com. It comes out on Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock.
Brett, I'm excited for Conference USA midweek. It's always the best time of the year. Excited to be tuned in with it tomorrow with you, and look forward to seeing you then.
Sounds great, Jake, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks to you, the listener, for joining us today. Again, don't miss tomorrow's live press conference at the conclusion of the game with Coach Derek Mason and players alike, and, of course, our post-game show with Brett. Tomorrow at noon before kickoff, we will be having our Behind Enemy Lines segment with a member of the Growl podcast, Maddox, to tell us everything you need to know about this Bears team before that game. And, again, we'll find out a little bit more about what the Bears have with or without Jacob Clark in that episode. If you're not already following us on all of our social media at Blue Raider Pod, that's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And then if you're listening to us on YouTube, I appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Don't miss another one of our uploads. And this last week, we did our first coach and player exclusive interviews with Hannah Haves of the soccer program and Caroline McCander of the women's volleyball program. So if you don't want to miss those, make sure you're subscribed there and tuned in. We will see you tomorrow night. And until then, go Blue.